My name is Jen Killian. I'm a lieutenant and community resource paramedic with East Pierce Fire and Rescue. And I am so excited to be part of this series. I am dealing with aging and care planning with my own aging adults, and we'll pepper in some stories here and there during Matt's presentation. I'm super pleased to introduce Matt Santelli from Pierce County Aging and Disability. He's their education and outreach coordinator, and Matt also comes with a lot of personal experience from working with his own parents. So we're so thrilled you're here, and again, thank you for joining us. And with no further time wasted, I'll hand the floor over to Matt.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jen. Thanks all for tuning in today. We're going to talk a little bit about some elder and aging care planning. This is one of the series of sessions like this we'll be doing. You can go on the East Pierce Fire and Rescue website under their events section and see that the schedule is going forward. So my name is Matt Santelli. I do work at the County Aging and Disabilities Resource Office doing community education and outreach sessions like this one. We do have some upcoming events happening. We have a more in-depth information series about dementia services and care. That's called our Oh My Gosh Now What series. That will be starting in July. And we have some other upcoming events. So you're always welcome to visit our pierceadrc.org website, www.pierceadrc.org. We have event pages on there. We have a resource section, A to Z. We have public meetings and events calendars where you can find information on programs and services like what we're doing today. If you're in the situation of looking for care for a family member or for yourself, or just want to understand a little bit more about the long-term care planning process. So the disclaimer I'll give first, as I always do, is that information I'm providing today is not intended to serve as an exhaustive list of aging parent situations. Family caregivers are always advised to consult with social service professionals, legal experts, physicians, family members, and other trusted individuals to develop a plan for long-term care. You can always, again, access our website. There's a portal there. You can send us an email. You can always give us a call at 253-798-4600 for additional guidance. Next. Okay, so the list of topics we'll cover today, and we'll finish absolutely no later than 11:30. Who's the caregiver? What are the duties of caregivers in family situations typically? When do you know that you are now acting as a caregiver for aging parents? And aging parents is kind of a broad term we're using. It could be a husband or wife you're caring for. It could be a disabled adult child you're even caring for, another relative. What the numbers look like for caregiving, what are some challenges facing caregivers? We'll cover some dementia warning signs because in my own experience with my own parents, the dementia caregiving situation was really the most complex and most challenging. Rather than just caring for someone who has some physical incapacity. We'll talk about some actions that family members should take for proper care planning, professional care options for aging parents, how to make your home or the home in which the person you're caring for is living safer and more accessible for aging parents, and some health and safety tips for caregivers as well. So we'll go methodically through those one by one, and if you have any questions, you can certainly post them in the chat, and we'll take some breaks here and there where I'll ask if there's any questions in the chat. Next. So how do we determine who's a caregiver? We're going to be talking today about care situations where it's family care. So where a husband's taking care of a wife or vice versa, where again, an adult child's taking care of a parent or a parent's taking care of an adult child. Caregiver is the one giving the care, and a care receiver is getting the care. I know that sounds simplistic, but many of our programs over the years have kind of shifted back and forth. Are we looking at the caregiver as the client, or are we looking at the person receiving care as the client? Some programs still look at the care receiver as the client, others look at the caregiver as the client. Often there are also what are known as care supporters involved who help out when needed. Children of aging parents are now helping them as their caregivers. That's what I ended up doing. I was an adult child of aging parents and in my 40s. And we'll talk a little bit about the age ranges of when that care usually starts happening. The definition of what is a caregiver changes over time. Family dynamics, economy, longevity changes. Changes in technology have also imposed an additional burden on caregivers, along with greater risks of financial exploitation. Giving care, quote unquote, as a caregiver can be defined in many aspects as we'll talk about on the following slides. Also, because lifespans have increased due to new medical technology and modern medicine, the number of older adults needing care is rapidly growing. The fastest growing group of people in the United States are those who are 80 years of age or older. So again, we'll touch on some of this and how technology has really transformed in a positive way what care looks like, but also has added some additional burdens for caregivers. Thanks. So some duties, we'll just name them off because I know in my own situation as a professional in dealing with families and care situations, it was a much different experience in actually having it happen to me myself and caring for my parents, because my view was I'm just being a caring son or a caring son-in-law, whatever the case might be, when I was taking care of in-laws as well. And you kind of really have to transform your thinking on that and thinking in terms of what are you doing as a person that's caregiver related, because that's when you can start thinking of long-term care planning and programs and services to support what you're doing. So examples of caregiving duties: managing finances, bills, taxes, financial scam prevention, effectively using online platforms for access to care receiver bank accounts, investment accounts, communicating with friends, family, service providers. This is a big one because so much of what we do now is electronic. Not even a short time ago, a lot of what we were still doing was on paper and through ledgers and sharing documents. Now that communication is typically all happening electronically, which is a great advantage. Like I said, when we were setting up automatic bill paying for my parents, they have online platforms to do that, but it's also challenging because it does make them more liable to fall prey to scams and things, especially if they're still dabbling and working on computers, iPads, smartphones, and things like that. Grocery delivery and purchase, transportation, scheduling, and medical, dental, and vision appointments, housekeeping services. I did a lot of that for my parents, and my wife did a lot of that for her parents. Scheduling, plumbing, electrical, maintenance of the home, maintaining the motor vehicle they might have, support of medical equipment installation and preparation in the home. We did a lot of that. We did a ramp, we did grab bars, we did safety bars in the bathrooms, we added railings. We took out all the carpeting and stuff that was rugs that might easily be tripped upon. Purchase and installation medical equipment. We did shower chairs, bath benches, detachable shower heads, things like that. And prompts and direct assistance for care receiver or personal hygiene. So by the time we were kind of at the end of situations with my mom and my dad, we had to do a lot of hands-on personal care, washing them, helping them in and out of the shower, changing them, things like that, until they went into care. Next. More duties. These are big ones. Locating, understanding, and filing for benefits, including Social Security, retirement, disability, Medicare, Medicaid, and so on. I was in a fortunate position of understanding those systems and those programs because I work in that world, but it's very overwhelming if you don't work in that world, and that's again why we would encourage you to call us for some guidance on Social Security benefits, Medicare choices, Medicaid, and so on. Locating and understanding and filing durable power of attorney forms, protective payee forms for Social Security, advance directives, post forms, last wills and testaments, and all that. And then there's just the stuff, again, that goes with being a caring family member in a care situation, providing emotional support, companionship, eating meals together, television programs, working in the yard, taking walks, car rides, attending faith services, and then all the medical stuff at the time that I was going through in terms of all the COVID protections and things, arranging for COVID vaccines, boosters, other preventive vaccines for caregivers and care receivers at physician offices or local pharmacies. Next. So it was a process, like I've been talking about. It was an evolution in terms of understanding what I was doing as a supportive son or son-in-law versus being a caregiver. Whether you're a husband and wife in that situation, or you're thinking about your own situation and trying to identify people around you that might be helpful in taking care of you. I recognized I had become a caregiver for my parents when the activities I did with them were no longer things I wanted to do in terms I was choosing to do with them, but instead were things I needed to do for them that were kind of weekly requirements. So the example I get on that is just doctor's office visits. Periodically, I would go to doctor office visits with my mom and dad prior to the point when they were declining, just to kind of understand things a little bit better and what their medical care was encompassing. They were infrequent. It was usually easy drive with them. Sometimes my mom would drive, she would even pick me up. We would go to the doctor's office, we'd get some information from the doctor, I would kind of let them know who I was. And then over the years, as my mom and dad got more and more ill and my mom wasn't driving anymore, my dad had stopped driving, that task became typically a task for scheduling a whole day. And it would involve a lot of hours of my time. As their health needs became more serious, I would have to have a significant amount of planning for that event to happen, that medical visit. It would include preparation time in the morning, making sure they took their medications, ate their meals, that they were showered, dressed, had me drive them to the doctor's office. I would physically assist them in and out of the doctor's office, out of the car to the office, ask a lot of questions, take notes, and then schedule follow-up appointments, take them to diagnostic testing, lab work, stop at the pharmacy. So really, I learned that I had to reserve a big amount of time. Typically, it was a whole day because I had to make sure I would get there. Oftentimes, they wouldn't even know I was coming, even though I told them the night before I had the appointment on the calendar because they were suffering from some memory loss and confusion. Next. So by the numbers, how big is this caregiving population that we're talking about here in the US? In general, we're talking about anywhere from 43 to 44 million people in the United States that have taken on some sort of an unpaid caregiver role in their families. When we're talking about caring for an adult age 50 or older, anywhere from 34 to 35 million Americans taking on that role. There's more debilitating conditions like the Alzheimer's dementia, other forms of dementia. That's anywhere from 15 to 16 million family caregivers taking on that unpaid support role. And the age ranges are very different for caregivers and care recipients, understandably so. About 48% of caregivers are aged 18 to 49 years old when they're that family caregiver. Only 14% of patients are in that range, obviously. Average age of a caregiver sits at about 49 years old. So in my situation, I was born in 1965. My mom really first ran into problems in 2012 when she had an emergency appendectomy. So I was 47 years old at that time. So this is then pretty close to reflecting reality here in terms of my own experience with that. And of course, people are living longer. My mom lived to almost 93. My dad lived to almost 96. And so had they died sooner, I always like to say, I would have said, wow, they lived a long life into their 90s and I never had to even really do much with them. But that wasn't the case because the last 3 years of my mom's life, the last 3 to 4 years with my dad, we were providing a lot of care and support. Next. So the challenges, well, number one, like I said, number of older adults needing care rapidly growing, fastest growing group, those who are 80 years or older. That leaves fewer young family members to provide adequate care and support for seniors. Half of caregivers are employed. I was employed when taking care of my mom and dad, as were my siblings. My wife, when she was taking care of her mom and dad, she was employed, as were her siblings. So both of us were working and both of us at different times were trying to manage mom and dad's care. There's fewer children being born, so as we go into this next cohort, there'll be fewer family caregivers available, higher divorce rates, more people are opting out of marriage or not having kids at all. All these factors mean fewer people can act as caregivers for family members and loved ones. And that's why people end up calling us. Certainly we want you to call us for long-term care planning as a family member, but we get lots of calls from seniors that are isolated. They'll call, their neighbors will call, their friends from church will call, a doctor's office will call and say, this lady has no one, her husband died, the kids aren't around, or the kids are estranged, or the kids are out like malicious, but she has no kids, and we have to start doing some planning to take care of that person because they don't have that family support around them to be cared for. And then what are the options then? We have to talk about private paid care coming into the home. We have to help them apply for grant funded care like family caregiver support or Medicaid funded care in the home. Or if that isn't working, we have to seek placement into a care facility. As I said, professional care facilities are often the only option for family members seeking consistent quality of care for loved ones. Professional care providers are struggling to fill positions. And so this is kind of another across the board problem we're facing with the current economy, where there's a lot of choices that people have to work in different places. The professional care world, whether that's in-home care being provided by an agency or care in a care facility like an adult family home, an assisted living facility, skilled nursing, hospitals, the whole gamut, they're all struggling to keep those positions filled. So we have a lot of interested agencies wanting to provide care. We have a lot of care facilities that are quality. They just can't always feel like they're properly staffed to fully care. So we hear things like professional care agencies are limited on who they can staff in terms of doing the care. We'll hear from care facilities that say, well, we have a certain number of beds, but we don't have enough staffing to manage those beds. So we're kind of shrinking our census, our population in our care facility. That's constantly happening. Next.
Yeah, and I would just add to, being out here at
Engine
Pierce
118
Fire,
and
we
918.
often will hear
Channel
that
502.
caregiving agencies struggle to have staff members that can come out this
32nd
far.
Street East.
So that
Engine
kind of tends to
118,
add to the caregiver
918.
shortage problem
Channel
when
502.
we're in more
Freehold.
remote areas.
Difficulty breathing.
Absolutely.
9307, 32nd Street East. Time 10:27.
Caregiver mortality. So this is a statistic that I'd like to share. It's an unfortunate one, but we witness this all the time in the work we do at the county. Depending upon what study you read, anywhere from 30 to 70%, 30% to 70% of husband, wife, partner caregivers age 60 and older die before the person they're caring for dies. Planning ahead for this likelihood is essential, not only for the caregiver and care receiver, but also for everyone else in the family. So we get these situations where we'll get a call on a Monday from a neighbor or a doctor's office that will say, Mr. Jones was treated over the weekend, he's in the hospital. We know he was caregiver for Mrs. Jones. There's no one there to care for her now. What's going to happen? So we run into those situations a lot. So this is why we have a family caregiver support program specifically designed to provide support and relief to those husband and wife caregivers. Sometimes it's an adult child caring for an elderly parent and vice versa. But we also try to build some contingency plans into those care situations when that's happening, because it's reliable until it's not, right? Mom's good taking care of dad until she gets sick. Dad's good taking care of mom until he gets sick. And so that's why we try to build some contingency planning into those husband and wife caregiving situations, especially in that 60 and over age group. Next. So I'm going to veer off a little bit and talk about some dementia warning signs. Again, this is because in my experience, when we talk to family members and in the care situations that we encounter, the dementia care is the most challenging. I always say that if you are fully physically intact, but you start down the dementia process road, your care over time is going to be far more complex and challenging than if you even had a physical limitation, but your brain was still fully functioning. And we see this all the time. We see four-way paralyzed folks, people wheelchair bound, bed bound, who are still mentally alert and can conduct their care. So they understand that they need care. The dementia thing is so insidious because it comes on slowly, and slowly over time, you don't even recognize that you have the need for care. So by example, for my mom, I would ask her, Mom, we need to get you washed up today. You haven't showered this week. Oh yeah, I showered last night. No, she didn't. I would say, Mom, let me go ahead and make you breakfast. I already made breakfast. No, she didn't, right? Mom, we need to help you sort the mail. I already sorted it. She didn't. So you get to that middle stage of dementia where the person doesn't even recognize there's any limitation happening. They just think everything's fine and everything's going around great. They're doing what they always did, and they're not. So these are some warning signs from the Alzheimer's Association, and I kind of like to do this to normalize what dementia, memory loss, and confusion is versus just senior moments that we all get as we get older. We always say that memory loss is the first and worst symptoms. That's the one you normally recognize first in a loved one, and then it gets worse over time, and then confusion kind of builds from memory loss. So number one, memory loss that disrupts daily life. That's kind of a big first indicator of what might be a dementia process. And again, we always tell folks and family members, memory loss to an extent like this could be a variety of origins, right? We talked about delirium being some organic situation, dehydration, a stroke, a medication interaction, urinary tract infection for women. So again, we always say doctor encounter first when symptoms are identified, because we want to make sure physically there's nothing driving this memory loss, and there can be physical conditions that can do that. So what you want to ask yourself is, what is typical for your family member? So with my mom, what was typical for her, that she was on top of things daily. She would put things on a calendar. She could understand how to make a cake or prepare breakfast for dinner. Then all of a sudden she wasn't able to do that anymore. She wasn't able to work the digital oven we got her as a replacement for her dial oven. after a year. First year she did fine. Into that second year, she would call me every week saying the oven's broken, the oven's not working, and I would have to show her how to work it, and then a week later, she would forget how to use it again. So that's memory loss disrupting daily life. It's very different than saying, well, I forgot an appointment or I forgot my keys. I was supposed to be bringing a thank you card with me for an event I'm going later today. I forgot it at home, so my wife called me on the way here and said, you forgot it. Well, that's not a sign of dementia. Now, if she had called me and said, you forgot the card, I'm like, what card? What are you talking about? Then I'd say I'm having some problems. But the fact that I left the card on the dresser drawer just basically means that that's a senior moment, we all have. Number 2, challenges in planning or solving problems. Again, going back to my mom, what is typical for your family member? So my mom, like I said, she could write checks, she could pay bills, she could sort mail, and all of a sudden, over a course of a year's time, she couldn't do any of those things. Now, again, she thought she was doing them, but she wasn't doing them. So one clear indicator of that for me was the mail piling up on her dining room table. She was always very efficient on checking the mail, putting a note on it and filing it away. Then she would circle back to the cabinet, pay that bill, whatever she needed to do. The bills were piling up, the mail was piling up, there were late notices. So right away, that is not typical for her. Now, if you have a family member where they're always late on paying bills and they're never sorting mail, then that's not much of a change, but in my mom's situation, it was a dramatic change. Next. So, another, difficulty completing familiar tasks at home, work, and leisure. My mom was an avid reader of newspapers, magazines. She would change her clothes regularly, always wanted to look her best, and all of a sudden she wasn't doing that anymore. So that was not typical for her. She wouldn't read the paper, she would look at it and put it back down. I would ask her what's in the news today, she couldn't tell me. She would sleep in her clothes, she didn't want to change her clothes, or she would say she did change her clothes, but she hadn't changed for several days, couldn't safely drive anymore. So there, again, this is an example of what's typical for your family member versus mine. For my mom, that was not typical for her, that was dramatic changes that were occurring. Number 4, confusion with time or place, losing track of dates, seasons, the passage of time, forgetting where they are or how they get there. So my mom, for example, she would go to church with us. We would get to church, we would go have the church ceremony, we'd return home, and she would say, Matthew, why did you take me to that new church? I wanted to go back to St. Charles Church. Where I go, I'm like, Mom, that was the same church. No, it wasn't. It was a very different church. We drove a different way to get there. So right away, confusion, time, place, not understanding, some perceptual disturbances. And then even the idea of the calendar. Again, she was very good at putting everything on the calendar. So I would have dinner with them prior to her dementia coming along. I'd say, Mom, I'm gonna stop by, we'll go to church together on Sunday. She would write it on the calendar, 10 a.m. church, Matthew. And then all of a sudden I would tell her, Mom, I'm picking you up for church tomorrow. She wouldn't even think about putting it on the calendar. And even if I put it on the calendar, she wouldn't think to check the calendar for appointments. So that was not typical for her, that was a major change. Next. Trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. This isn't necessarily across every dementia. This was my mom. We believe she had vascular dementia because we had a brain scan. It was indicative of some scarring in her brain from some mini strokes she had. She also had some very florid visual hallucinations, so she might have had some other comorbidity with some other dementia process going on. But for her, all of a sudden, she had difficulty judging distances, shapes, colors, understanding proper usage of tools and utensils. I remember one day I was eating dinner with her and she kept trying to kind of use the knife to eat spaghetti. You know, you obviously can't do that. And then I would have to direct her, no, Mom, use the fork, twirl it. You know, we're an Italian-American family, we ate lots of spaghetti over the years. All of a sudden, she wasn't able to do it. Couldn't really identify colors anymore. That would confuse her. Shapes would confuse her. Couldn't really understand anymore how to turn the TV off and on. I even put an on and off Post-it note on the TV so she could hit the button and she would leave the TV on. I would come, she would be in bed and the TV would be on and I would ask her, Mom, I didn't know how to do it. I would show her, she would say, okay, and I would task her, show me how to turn the TV on and off, and she couldn't do it. So another sign, not typical for her, not being understood to that level. Number 6, difficulty in words and speaking, writing, unable to finish sentences, unable to voice needs, how they're feeling, unable to write a sentence on a page. My mom suddenly, over the course of probably 3-4 months, could not write out anything of significance. And this, again, was a woman that was always writing checks to make payments and make donations. She had a check ledger. So I noticed as those bills were piling up among the other mail piles on her dining room table, I would check her checkbook and there was nothing noted in there. She would tell me she had been making the payments and done her checkbook, but she hadn't. And so I asked her to write a check to pay a bill. She had no understanding how to do it any longer. Now, I could write the check for her. She was still incapable of making a clear signature, but she couldn't complete the check otherwise. So that's, again, not typical for her, a major change for her when that change happened. Next. Misplacing items and blaming others. This is a very common aspect of dementia. And again, this isn't like this morning, I forgot that card and my wife called and said, well, you left it on the dresser drawer, on the top of the dresser here. So I have to go back home and get it now. That's very different than moving household items around and then not remembering who did it and then claiming that other people did it. So my mom would often insist when we'd come to the house that we'd move her things around. It would upset her greatly. Or she would sometimes say she was certain that someone was coming into the house and moving things around. And again, this was just her basically voicing the anxiety she was feeling with her memory loss, because she would move things around but forget she had done it. So she had, like, for an example, a beautiful Little Red Riding Hood cookie jar we had in the family for years, and it would go missing. And I would ask her, Mom, what happened to the cookie jars? I don't know, I'm sure someone stole it. I would find it in her closet, I would find it in the basement. Once I found it in the backyard on the picnic table. Obviously, she was moving it around, but then she would get very upset. She would call me sometimes and say, oh, someone stole the Little Red Riding Hood cookie jar, and then we would have to go searching for it. Nowadays, what I would do, I would Apple AirTag that cookie jar so I could find it, because we spent hours and hours looking for that Little Red Riding Hood cookie jar over the years, a lot of hours, believe me. So again, very unusual for her. She kind of had her house laid out the way she wanted to, didn't unnecessarily move things. That was kind of her memory map at home, and all of a sudden that was breaking down. Number 8, decreased or poor judgment. This often happens. People will give away money or valuables. Fortunately, my parents didn't do that, but she was definitely no longer paying attention to personal grooming or hygiene. Her personality changed. She would blurt out criticisms of people's or profanities around the table. She did that a lot at the church table. After church, we would go for coffee and donuts, and she'd say the most wild things. Wouldn't care about her hygiene, or would insist that she looked good, and she didn't, because she hadn't showered, she hadn't changed her clothes. So again, not typical for her to act that way. Major change when it did start happening. Next. Withdrawal from work or social activities. This is often another early symptoms that folks notice, because the person's memory loss might be accelerating, their confusion might be accelerating. They start to avoid people. So like every year on my mom's birthday, we would take her to her favorite restaurant, and then one year she was just adamant, I don't want to go, I don't want to go. And I know it was because she was just confused. It was in the evening, it was dark, she was frightened. So that was a major change for her. So you see this isolation starting to happen. Oftentimes the person that's suffering from dementia at the table, like I said, with my mom, she would either be crazy frank and rude to people, where she was never that way, or she would just be silent. So those are the things you typically see early on with dementia happening. And then number 10, changes in mood and personality. My mom was always a very calm, confident woman, suddenly became fearful, anxious, insecure, impulsive, angry. And then it was just a matter of trying to understand what she was feeling. And this isn't necessarily a dementia understanding class today, but I'll always tell people, if you have someone in the family suffering from dementia or traumatic brain injury, and you're around them a lot, you always want to think past the content of what they're saying in terms of what the content is expressing about how they're feeling. So my mom, for example, would often see activity on the lawn. She would see clowns, soldiers, a movie being made, all on the front lawn, not really happening. There's no point in you or me in that situation to say, Mom, that's nonsense. There's nothing happening on the lawn. But you want to engage and say, what are you seeing? She would see children playing, she would see a movie being made. She was very fascinated by it and often intrigued and amused by it. But we knew something different was happening when she would say, there's a soldier pointing a gun at me on the lawn. There's a clown, a scary looking clown pounding on the window. Then we would know she was scared. And so then it was like, Mom, you're scared. What can we do for you? Well, one thing I would always do is close the blind. That made a big difference. and then just talk to her calmly and calm her down. So you're not gonna reality talk a dementia person back to reality, okay? That's not gonna happen. You gotta think about what the feeling is versus what they're telling you in terms of the bare content of what you're hearing. So I'm gonna take a break there. Jen, maybe have comments. If anyone has comments or questions in the chat, we'll take those now.
We don't have any comments in the chat at the moment.
Okay.
If everybody, I don't know if I put a comment in the chat, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand or type it into the chat. I'm monitoring that, so.
Thanks. Okay, and then this is kind of a closure on the dementia with my mom. This is kind of a funny story. She would often insist, like I said, that there were things happening out at the lawn and that people were staring at her through the window. Sometimes she would see a man hiding in the closet that she would kind of scream at and tell him to leave the house. And then she would often tell us that we were pretending not to see them just to make her look crazy. This was early on. After that, when I had kind of gotten smart about it, then I would kind of engage her in the story that she was telling me about what she was seeing. But she felt vindicated in her visions there when she went to the eye doctor, got a vision exam, which showed that her eyesight was excellent. She never wore glasses her whole life. In her mind, that meant that all these visual hallucinations she was experiencing were real, and we were the crazy ones, not her. So she would often angrily tell me, I know I see clowns and soldiers on the front lawn. The doctor told me my eyesight is perfect. There's nothing wrong with my eyesight. So that's just one of those funny anecdotes that come out of something you don't really expect, that an eye exam would kind of reinforce the visual hallucinations she was having, because after all, the doctor told her her eyesight was fine. So of course she's seeing clowns and soldiers. Okay, so we kind of touched on caregiving situations in terms of the numbers, caregiver mortality we talked about. We talked a little bit about how dementia poses an additional challenge for family caregivers. So now let's talk with some action steps that families should think about in care planning, whether again, it's you providing care for a family member or thinking about long-term care planning for yourself. So you want to always emphasize aging in place, okay? Most older adults will say that they want to continue to live at home as safely and as long as possible. We always want to talk about healthy, safe, and financially stable at home as long as possible. That's the philosophy behind aging in place. We don't want to disrupt that familiar living situation because, again, that familiarity is what's going to help them sustain living healthier and more independent. We don't want to do a disruption if we can. So that's where the meetings need to start to happen. We met with my mom and dad early on. They definitely said we want to continue to live in their home. They live in a beautiful home in the town of Fircrest, safe neighborhood. It needed some upgrades, and so we worked on that, but still, that's where they wanted to be. And so that was the discussion we had. How can we make the home safer? It wasn't an easy road because my dad objected to a lot of the things we did. But lacking some significant falls that happened very late in the process where my mom had to go into care. My dad fell a few times and broke his ribs. He went into care and then COVID hit. So there was no way we could really safely bring him home and get enough care in the home to keep him safe. He would have been in and out of the home back to the hospital emergency room constantly. So when he took that fall and went up to skilled nursing during COVID, we were able to just keep him there. Fortunately, we had the means to do that. Adult children taking on roles if they're capable. I had a sister that was always around them a lot and wasn't working at the time that they really had the significant care needs. So we basically set up a contract and worked with the tax consultants where she could be paid on a contract to provide care for them. That worked out really well. That was unexpected that we could do that. We also had some other families stay there to do overnight stuff. I kind of managed all the financial and healthcare decision making, and then I had some other family members doing some other more physical tasks that could be done for moving some stuff around and things like that. Transportation, we kind of all handed off with that. You have to allow parents and adult children to voice fears of what the future might hold for them. Being a care for the receiver can be just as difficult as being a caregiver. So my mom was going through a lot of this. She talked a lot about some existential issues about her faith, the afterlife, what a decline would mean, would we still take care of her? She had a lot of those concerns happening. And oftentimes my dad, late in life when we were caring for him, he expressed those worries. And even though we had care in the home for him, he would still say, well, who's gonna take care of me when I get sick? It's like, Dad, you're sick right now, we're caring for you right now. But again, he didn't see it that way, he just saw his family members stopping by to visit and take care of things for him. Setting firm dates and timelines for tasks to be completed. This is very helpful in my experience, because unless you don't have a plan with dates and timelines, it's easy to keep putting things on. So home modifications, transportation alternatives, financial management. So for example, when my mom went into care in 2012, she had an emergency appendectomy, was a couple weeks in the hospital, like an 8-week rehab and skilled nursing. That's when we swooped in and set up the ramp, the grab bars, the safety bars, the railings, all those things, because we were trying to make sure everything would be ready to support her when she got home. That's when I really started to dive into her financial management situations. We set up a family trust. That's when we kind of figured out she was no longer safely driving and moving keys from the house and paying for an agency caregiver to drive them around to appointments during the day, and then us doing that as well. So we kind of waited for that big medical emergency to happen to do it, but then we really hammered it to get it all done and set up, which served us very well a few years later when the dementia process started to happen. And then siblings assigned to those tasks must really become deeply familiar with them and understanding financial, insurance, medical. I was the professional in the family, I was the youngest, but I was pretty much the one managing most, if not all, of these aspects of their care. And that's, again, you don't quite know in family cohorts who's going to be the most capable. I had the advantage of having the training. I was able to consult with my colleagues at work when situations came up, so I naturally had the advantage. But I was the youngest again, so then there's some tension there between youngest and oldest siblings as to who really knows mom and dad best. And that's when sometimes there's aspects of siblings that don't really understand what's happening, don't want mom and dad to be in bad situations, and so they see things differently. I'll call it denial, because that's what it is, but every family is a little different in how that might develop. Moving quickly on documents that must be in place to manage financial and medical decision making. So this is very important, because we do a separate talk on this, Keep It Legal, which will be the July talk, which is more expanded version of what I'll talk about right now. But we always tell families that long-term care planning and having the proper documents for decision-making need to be done while you're still healthy and understand the planning process. The tragedy is we'll get calls from family members on Monday that will say, boy, mom, dad had a stroke over the weekend. We never set up the power of attorney forms. We don't have a last will and testament. They're unconscious. What do we do? Well, you hope that they're going to recover, and then you conduct their care. There's an actual hierarchy of care choices in terms of who will be the decision maker in state law, so the medical professionals would default to that hierarchy. But you'd much rather have everything in place with documents, because again, the hierarchy in family choices might not be the best choices. So like for my mom and dad, mom would have been considered the choice decision maker for dad and vice versa. They weren't capable when the medical emergencies happened. So we have these documents in place already. We have the POST form, which has to be completed by the physician with the person that's their care planning is happening for them. They need to be there. Hopefully there's adult children or other people involved that are willing to be there when the POST form is completed. This is physician's order for life-sustaining treatment, also known as a DNR form. It could be a form that's expanded depending upon what the physician wants to do and what the discussion is. It's really typically posted in the home to make sure it's there. It's also provided to your doctor, to care facilities that you might be involved in, diagnostics, specialists and all that. Any comments on that, Jim?
Yeah, this is a bright green form, and it really, it's somewhat similar to advanced directive, healthcare directive, in that it expresses what that person's wishes are for their care, or if their heart were to stop. And they're really, again, the POST form is really instructions for us, emergency responders, if their heart were to stop, or they were to stop breathing, or they were to, have a life-threatening illness happen. It gives us instructions of what the person would have wanted done for them. It should stay with the patient, with the individuals. If they're transported to the hospital, it should go with them, and that will help inform the hospital team. You know, again, this is all about what that person's wishes are for their life, end of life, and care in emergency situations.
Thank you, yeah, it's, and this is one that has to happen in office with doctor. They're the one that will issue the form, everyone will sign off on that, and you can take that form home with you, it'll be scanned into their system. And so it'll be available to the doctors, and then it'll be available to first responders in the home, with physical document being usually posted on the refrigerator.
It's also really helpful if those discussions do happen as a family. So if the POLST form is done, advance directives are done, it's helpful that everyone in the family understands, you know, again, that these are the individual's wishes. You know, and I think most people want to honor that person's wishes. So it's good that there's no surprises when the time comes.
Absolutely, and we'll go into this more in depth in the July session. That'll be July 15th, same time, 10 a.m. We'll be at the Bonnie Lake Station, East Pierce Fire and Rescue Headquarters, Station 111, and it will be available on streaming as well. Advance directive, that's also known as a living will, to be completed again by the person who's planning their care. Again, nice to have adult children involved, because typically there's someone listed on the advance directive as being the one who's going to be the decision maker for that living will. And the advance directive is where you're talking about whether you want to have artificial hydration, artificial nutrition, things like that in an end of life situation. Extraordinary measures to keep you going. That's different than like a POLST form that's indicating like mostly like CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, in the moment that the person's dying. You know, that's very different than planning for an end of life period of time, what you want to have happen during that period of time, what your room might be set up like, what music you might want playing, there's something you want someone to read to you. This is where you kind of talk about those comfort feelings and experiences that you might want to list with the living will. The living will is basically the script you're providing to your power of attorney. So that's the next thing on letter C. We want to make sure there's durable powers of attorney for financial and healthcare decision making. Again, the person that's planning needs to be involved with this, whether it's you, an adult parent, a husband, wife. And again, we like to have adult children around as well, because it's likely that an adult child is going to be listed on these forms as being the decision maker that implements the wishes as listed on the form. My personal preference, in my experience of it, and we always want you in this legal world to consult with an elder law attorney, and we'll give you some options on how to do that, is that you make the power of attorney documents effective immediately. And again, you're doing this while you're healthy and of sound mind. So we set these all up with my mom and dad early on, and then in 2012, we updated them after my mom recovered from her appendectomy. And at the update, we basically said for mom and dad, the power of attorney that I would be assigned and my brother would be the second, and it was effective immediately. And then we went ahead and filed that away in a cabinet. Everybody had a copy, the doctor had a copy, the family attorney office had a copy, and we didn't actively use that document for several years after that 2012 year. If you wait and have it listed as being effective at incapacity, those clauses are very difficult to implement here in the state of Washington. I hear it's easier in other states, but these documents are state by state regulated. So a power of attorney form written for the state of Washington might read differently than a power of attorney form written in a different state, okay? But the idea that an incapacity clause basically requires you to have two doctors verify that the person is incapacitated. In my experience, doctors don't want to cross that line into that legal world of making a legal judgment about you. So that's why my recommendation is that the power of attorney form be effective immediately. The other reason you want to do that is because sudden illnesses and injuries happen too. You know, people in their 50s get sick quickly, heart attacks, strokes, they get into car accidents, they take a disabling fall. So then trying to scramble and have to make decisions and trying to convince doctors to sign an incapacity clause, especially when there might be some possibility of recovery, you don't want to be going through that. You want to just be able to pull it out of the cabinet, show it to everybody and say, yeah, mom or dad is unconscious now from this sudden illness or injury. I'm the decision maker as listed on the document. I can make the healthcare decisions. I know what the end of life wishes are from the living will. We've got the post form. It's all a piece. In addition to that, you want to have the financial piece set up so you can immediately start paying bills and taking care of other kinds of financial obligations that might be happening. I'm going to take a break there for questions, and I know Jen's been through this. She might have some additional details she wants to add.
Not really. I mean, I would just say that know that there are other versions of advanced directives that are available out there as well. Like, for example, my dad has dementia, and while he is still cognitively very capable, and he was able to fill out a dementia advanced directive, which kind of spells out some of the situations that might come up specifically with individuals with dementia, like aggressive behavior or things like that, and what his wishes would be if that were to happen. You know, there's also one on voluntary stopping of eating and drinking in Washington State, where if somebody, you know, feels that they've reached a certain threshold, they want to be allowed to not take in voluntarily any food or drink. So it's good to know that there's kind of those different specific versions out there that might apply to your loved one.
Yeah, there's an expanded kind of package document we call it's named 5 Wishes. That's another one that really does an expanded healthcare power of attorney, financial power of attorney, living will scenarios, and really kind of fleshes out how you go through the process of building out that document. So it's a very meaningful document, far beyond just the bare bones documents you can get as well. Last will and testament, again, in consultation with an attorney. Having it will save a lot of headaches for your family heirs, whoever they might be, and you got to know where it is, because again, we get calls from people. We know we did it somewhere, we don't know where it is. Can you help us? No, we can't help you because we're not going to go searching through basements and attics for this document. So you want to know where they are. You want to double check where they are every year. Make sure all the people that need them and that are named on them have a copy. Again, this is my advice. I've heard from attorneys who say, no, get them done and don't show them to anybody. That makes no sense to me. You're going to be naming other people in these documents who are going to have a significant role while you're alive in your decision making, or a significant role after you pass in determining the outcome of your estate. Okay, so they need to know and be ready for this. There shouldn't be any surprises along with this stuff, these documents. That's my guidance on that. I'm not an attorney. So please consult with an elder law attorney about the standard on that. You can also do long-term care planning with elder law attorneys on that financial side to manage assets in the most efficient way allowed by law. So an example, my poor sister, she died recently after a long illness. She was in her, I think she had just turned 70 or close to it, never set up the last will and testament. Son passed away a few years ago, so she's got 2 granddaughters. So now there's a probate process happening because she didn't have the last will and testament set up. Now, even with the last will and testament, you typically have to file it in the court, but in general, it's just the court verifying that the testament is a legal document here in the state of Washington. But because she had nothing and she did have assets, now the probate process is happening. You have to identify debtors. You have to make sure there's a proper split among the 2 granddaughters, and they can file counterclaims saying one should have more than the other. You have to pay legal fees for the court filings and filings with the judge. And so having these documents make a huge difference. And again, having them while you're of sound mind and still healthy, knowing where they are and having the appropriate people identified know where they are as well. All of this information and legal guidance and the forms you can get at washingtonlawhelp.org, or you can call our office and get help as well with our list of elder law attorneys. Jen.
Just so you know, it's 11 o'clock.
Okay, great. So
Okay.
moving along.
And that Washington Law Help is a phenomenal website. It's a
Yes.
great resource with lots of free. One other thing that I just want to point out with the power of attorney, there is not a standard template for power of attorney in Washington state. So different lawyers might use different power of attorneys. It's not a seen one, seen them all type of thing, so just be aware of that.
Very good point, thank you. Okay, more actions you should take for proper care planning, adult children. Be ready to act quickly, and it's easy to act quickly if you have the documents in place, whether that's you as an adult child, setting this up with an adult parent, elderly parent, husband and wife, setting them up for one another, whatever the case might be. Because with the documents in place, it's easy to set up the care that's needed, whether that's in-home care, transportation, housework and errands. Having that emergency reaction plan in place is vital to make sure you're gonna have successful care outcomes. Like I mentioned, understand that some family members will be in denial. They're not gonna acknowledge that you're sick. You might have an adult child that's your best buddy, that's hanging around you all the time. They may be in complete denial because that's a huge aspect of their lives, you being alive to spend time with them. And so what I always say is that proximity to you doesn't imply capability. Okay, the person while you're healthy, who's closest to you, spends the most time with you and communicates with you the most, might not necessarily be the most capable one to be making some hard decisions about your healthcare, your financial situation. And even taking over that role sometimes is very, very emotionally challenging to someone who doesn't want to accept the reality that you're older and that you are going to die, okay? It can be very, very difficult for that person. Because my experience with it, when people aren't ready, is that they will take on a task and just not do it. It just won't get done because they feel taking on the task and acting in a role where they're helping you in a declining situation is them acknowledging that there's something bad going on. They don't want to take that step of acknowledging it, so they can't get the task done either. So this is where you need to know around your family members who's most capable. And then you'll have active saboteurs. There'll be close friends and other family members who will seek to keep you happy or the people that you're caring for happy. They'll often align themselves with the person who has the care need against you as the caregiver. They'll attempt to circumvent the limits you might put on them for health and safety. So again, you have to kind of be very firm in your own care planning and if you're taking care of someone else and making sure those other voices don't impact the care plan that you're setting up. Got to learn to be assertive and forceful in decisions, willing to spoil those unhealthy relationships that you might have or your parents might have. You as the decision maker must be prepared to have your aging parents and their allies become angry with you. All I can say there is, yeah, they're going to be angry with you. If you're setting things up with family members to be decision makers, they're not always going to make the decision in that moment that you're happy with. But this is where that trust level comes in. So you're going to want them to be confident in implementing the plan you all agreed to. You don't want them to relent. It's no different than when you were parenting them as a kid. They might not have wanted to go to the dentist. They might not have wanted to go to school. They might not have wanted to eat their vegetables, but you made them do it, right? And they weren't happy. They might have really disliked you in that moment. So be ready for that because they're going to be doing things now that you've asked them to do. And there might be some friction there, okay? Okay, if you need professional care in the home or in a care facility, things to know. Medicare does not pay for short-term, can pay only for short-term time-limited care in the home under home health and rehab, or in a care facility like a hospital and skilled nursing facility. It's all about the medical necessity and physician order, okay? Long-term care insurance, private pay VA, Medicaid can pay for care in the home or in a care facility. We have different programs that can do that. COPS, TSOA, Family Caregiver Support Program can also pay for home care. Don't worry about sorting this out, okay? We can give you the documents and the links to understand it at our office. 253-798-4600. There's a resource page at the end of the presentation. So don't worry about understanding this to the extent that you're detailed on it. We can help you with that. If you hire a professional home care agency, it's easily going to be $35 an hour for that care, probably 45 4-hour minimums per service visit. Long-term care insurance has some limitations on functional need, qualifying periods, daily rate of pay, and coverage duration. VA and Medicaid have strict limits on income and asset eligibility. The final page of the presentation has income and asset limits for different Medicaid programs. But again, those change year to year. So we always encourage you just to give us a call. And remember, the programs are voluntary. You have to agree to this care. Whoever you enlist to be your decision maker needs to agree to the care. Okay, so this is where the discussions have to be made, because my parents needed care at home. The first couple of caregivers we sent in, they wouldn't even let them in the house. And so we actually had to be there to get the caregiver in the door. Sometimes they would tell them to leave. We kind of encourage them to ignore that if they would say that, but it does happen. And people walk away from care facilities as well. So the plan and the agreements have to be in place, and the documents to make it happen, like the power of attorney forms. Next. Okay, you may fail and end up having to wait for a major medical emergency in order to execute an action plan. Talked to a lot of families who say mom and dad just don't want to get it done. So you're just waiting around for a medical emergency at that point, when they'll go into care and they'll be so sick that they can't leave care. And then you'll be managing their care in a facility in most cases. Facility levels of care, again, expensive. Assisted living at least $6,000 a month, with memory care at least $8,000 a month. An adult family home, which does much more hands-on physical care than assisted living and memory care do, could be upwards of $9,000 a month. And a full-scale medical facility setting, a skilled nursing facility setting, easily $11,000 per month. And again, Medicare only pays for time spent in a skilled nursing facility after a period of stay in a hospital, and usually only for the first 20 days is it going to be paid at 100%. There's a copay at day 21 if you need to stay longer. Sometimes people will convert to Medicaid funding for that if they meet income and asset limits. There has to be physician orders in place, care assessments for adult family homes, nursing assessments. Doctor's orders are vital, so please maintain contact with physicians. If you have a family member that doesn't like to go to the doctor, they have to have that relationship with that doctor, because at some point you're going to need those physician orders to be written for care. Next. Memory care, assisted living, that's the model we have here in Washington State. That's the only that allows for a locked, secure placement. My in-laws were in a locked, secure floor of their assisted living facility. A complete and durable power of attorney form for financial and health care, and a post form is typically enough to make a memory care facility placement happen. Adult protective services, if a person needs help and is refusing it, they can't swoop in and remove that person from that situation. They can investigate if there's self-neglect, financial, physical, mental neglect, exploitation, but they can't remove the person from the home. They can only voluntarily investigate. So then the option jumps to guardianship. You can file a guardianship in the state of Washington, where you will be assigned as the person caring for that senior or disabled adult, who's then been found by a court to be no longer capable of making their own decisions. That's a legal process, it's a legal filing, a legal pronouncement. It's expensive, it's time consuming, it's adversarial. We try to do the voluntary steps if we can to avoid guardianship. But early planning is the key, having those discussions. If you're the family member wanting to do the care planning and you need you're planning for your own care, bring those adult children into those conversations. But vice versa, if you're the adult child thinking, I want to plan for mom and dad's care, bring them into those conversations early and get started, okay? Don't point fingers and say, well, I want to get started, but they don't. You got to just throw it all on the table and make it happen.
I can just make a comment about facilities. Yes, memory care is the only one that allows locked placement, but just because somebody has dementia doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be in a locked facility. My mom has pretty advanced dementia, and she's in an assisted living facility in her own unit. She's not locked in, but she's also not a flight risk. She does not leave the facility on her own, and so she's able to stay, and staff can care for her. They're sort of specially trained in this facility. There are elder care concierge agencies or elder care placement agencies that can help guide you and listen to what your loved one's situation is and help figure out what the best type of facility is going to be for you. We can certainly provide you with a list of those agencies. I don't know if Matt, ADRC, has a list of those agencies, but that, it's kind of helpful to have somebody on your side that knows this stuff really well and can help guide you based on your unique situation.
It's a great suggestion, Jen, because yeah, we get family members who say, I called a dozen facilities and I still don't know which one to choose. Yeah, it really helps if you have one of those concierge care agencies guide you, because they'll kind of assess what the situation is with the family member that needs the care, narrow down that search from them knowing the capabilities and quality of different places that might be possible, and then help you implement that search. Plus, we have our ombudsman, long-term care ombudsman in our office. That's our state designated professional that works in our office with a team of volunteers, where they go out and do investigations, problem resolutions, inspections for care in care facilities. So you can always call us and ask for the most recent reports on a care facility you're looking at for care in terms of quality, history, complaints, any kind of sanctions against them, things like that. Okay, so first step, always thinking about you or a family member you're caring for, how to make that care receiver's home safer and more accessible. So right away, what we did with my parents, upgraded heating and cooling systems, went from an old oil furnace and an old electric body heater, natural gas, efficient heating system with air conditioning, efficient water heater. That really sustained my mom the last few years of her life at home, because they had no air conditioning and the summers were getting hotter and hotter. So having that air conditioning installed was a huge improvement on their ability to comfortably be at home over the hot summer months. Grab bars, ramps, we did some lift recliner chairs. We ended up putting a lock on the stairwell going to the basement. There was no reason for them to go in the basement anymore. Similarly, sometimes families do some sort of barrier so the person can't go into an upstairs situation. Hopefully you can live on one main floor. That's really key. Being able to live on one main floor as you get older, because the fall risk going up and downstairs is significant. So one main floor. And I always tell family members, if older adults are thinking of downsizing, try to find a one main floor situation, okay, where you're not having to go upstairs in the unit or to go upstairs to get to the unit, okay? Shower chairs, bath benches, a detachable shower head, toilet seat risers, extended shoe horns. I mean, these are things that will really make life easier for you and for anyone that's caring for you. It's especially the detachable shower head. I can't tell you what a huge, huge improvement that is, because you pull it off the hook, you've got water that you can move around your body. So even if you're sitting on a shower chair, you can do a complete shower situation, versus if you have that stationary head spraying water on you and you're sitting in a shower chair, you can't get clean very easily. So get that detachable shower head. It's one of the cheapest things you can do, but the most meaningful things you can do for outcomes. Medication containers, keeping those in a safe place, having plenty of walkers around, walkers for in the home, wheeled walkers for outside the home, different types of canes that people can use, secure and eliminate loose carpets and throw rugs. There's all kinds of cool stuff you can find at the Alzheimer's store, www.alzstore.com. You can find weighted utensils on there, colored plates with food guards, all kind of amplified phones, door alarms. There's just all kinds of amazing things you can get put into the home that you could order from them for someone suffering from memory loss and confusion. The personal emergency response systems that you wear around your neck as a necklace, you can wear them as a watch. Those are very sophisticated now. They're two-way communicators. Some of them have some health monitoring algorithms. Some of them have a fall detection algorithm. And I mentioned the Apple AirTags. You can take purses, wallets, you can take shoes for someone that might be a wanderer, or jackets. So you're never leaving stuff behind and not knowing where it is. Again, I can't believe how much time we spent looking for my mom's purse. Did she leave it at church? Did she not? She wandered a few times, we couldn't find her. If she had locators with her purse, if she had locators in her shoes, it would have made our lives so much easier. So please think about those Apple AirTags or something similar with your smartphone, okay? Next. And then as a caregiver, if you are setting up family members to provide care for you, make sure they have done first aid, make sure they've done fundamentals of caregiving classes, make sure they know proper lifting techniques for back, leg, and arm support. Private caregivers coming into the home, again, they're expensive, but it does provide relief. We do have a relief program family caregiver support program, non-Medicaid program where we can get relief in the home depending upon income, and the income standards are pretty generous. Respite care in the home, someone coming in to relieve that caregiver. Caregivers really should think about relaxation techniques, something to help them stay calm, whether it's yoga, meditation, aromatherapy, massage. And again, having those financial documents in place for durable power of attorney for healthcare and financial decision-making, post forms, living wills, last will and testament, and getting those burial and cremation plans set up too. This was a big deal in our family. My parents late in life suddenly decided they wanted to be cremated. We were cradle Catholics. The church does allow that now. There were family members that were outraged about that, saying that's wrong. We had to arrange a meeting with the church deacon to say it's not wrong. The church approves it now. It's okay to do it. Again, these are things that are unexpected, but planning for them, having the documents in place makes that planning active and real, especially for family members that are only peripherally involved but are always willing to give opinions, especially negative ones. Next. And then, like I mentioned, stress reduction techniques. Caregivers always have to think about their own healthcare needs, proper rest and nutrition, exercise, taking time off without feeling guilty. I got into that cycle where I felt I always had to be available to them. Over time, I realized, no, I have to be able to hand tasks off to family members and professionals, do some nurturing activities, finding support groups. We have a great support group that meets in downtown Puyallup at Multicare. That's a caregiver support group, and there's others around. Some are online. There's also some great YouTube videos you can get through an outfit called Trualta that provides all kinds of support online for caregivers, short and long videos about different caregiving techniques. Be willing to acknowledge your feelings. It's okay to be angry. It's also okay to feel guilty or feel some sort of regret that you didn't do everything perfectly. I certainly did not. I still look back and think I could have done better decision-making, both financial and healthcare wise, but we're only human. We're only gonna do the best we can. And sometimes in hindsight, you kind of work things out and say, I did the best I could, and we had a great outcome. Even if it wasn't a perfect outcome, it was a great outcome. Next. Okay. So useful resources on the screen here, and we can send these out to folks who dialed in. Our office, again, the County Aging and Disability Resource Center. All of the program planning I talked about, especially on the Medicaid side, caregiver programs, 253-798-4600. Our long-term care ombudsman for care facility quality and screening, 253-798-3789. Then we've got caregiver support group information to the Alzheimer's Association and Multicare. We have the Alzheimer's store. There's the donor closet for secondhand medical equipment. And I forgot to take off. I was just at this event. It was actually June 20th, not July 20th. I got to take that off there. This is a caregiver resource event that we went to last Friday, June 20th. Next year, we're hoping to have a caregiver conference in the month of June, which is going to be broadcast only, not live. So it'll be something you can tune into if you're a caregiver, so you don't have to get away from home for the care. And we're also going to have that recorded as well. So we're going to be doing that next year. We do have the Alzheimer's conference coming up in September. So again, call us 798-4600 or go on our website, pierceadrc.org, for our public meeting and events calendar to find all the upcoming events we have about caregiver services, support programs, things like that. And then final slide for those who are interested, these are our three major in-home care program, COPES, TSOA, and family caregiver support. All three of them have different income and asset limits. Family caregiver support has no asset limits at all. So again, I don't expect you to remember these data points. Just call us, we'll do the screening, and we'll see which program is the best fit for you to get care in the home if that's what you're looking for. All right, thanks so much for listening. I hope you got some good information out of it. Any questions in the chat? Any final comments from Jen?
Yeah, no, and I think everybody's got the ability to unmute themselves, or you can certainly type something into the chat. So appreciate you being here today. And again, we'll have a copy of this recording on our website, eastpiercefireandrescue.org, under events and classes, aging and elder care planning series. The recording will be there. So I'm going to end recording here. Thank you, Wayne. Appreciate that. And we hope to see you all for the next one in July.